Hello everyone, it's 2021.
And this is Shelf Indulgence.
Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of 2021. With the new year just starting, Vic and I wanted to talk about some of the most anticipated books that are coming out this year, specifically some debut authors that have books coming out.
Yeah, and we would love to thank Edelweiss and the publishers for providing us with advanced readers copies for all of these titles.
Yeah, what that means is Vic and I got to read some of these copies in advance of their publishing, and some of them haven't even been published as of this recording. So we kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an insight on what to expect. So the first book that I read was Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. It is a fantasy-based novel about two opposing sides having to come together to work towards a common goal.
And the first book that I read was Winter's Orbit by Efferina Maxwell. It's a romantic sci-fi about two people who enter an arranged marriage and end up having to save the empire that they're a part of.
So you can kind of see some of the similarities between the two. In Witches Steeped in Gold, we have a changing perspectives in the narrative. So we have two main characters. We have Irea and Jasmine. Now, Jasmine was raised with the royalty. She's a part of the ruling class. Irea is a prisoner of that class system. And both of them realize quite early on that they have a common goal of overtaking the current government to make it better for everyone in the kingdom.
Now, that's kind of similar to Winter's Orbit because we have Janin, who has previously been in an arranged marriage because he is one of the treaty members between his planet and the main planet in the Empire. And then we have Kiem, who is a prince who's related to the Emperor and who is a cousin of Janin's last husband. And they enter an arranged marriage. They don't know each other very well. They don't really know how to trust each other. And then they end up being thrust into a new situation in which they have to solve the mysterious death of Janin's last husband. And so they are kind of on opposite sides of this treaty reformation because this is the time when the treaty is being gone over. And so they have to solve it so that both sides and everyone in the empire are safe and continue to work together and there's no civil war or anything. So it's kind of similar, even though they're both of them are a little more privileged. You certainly have one side being way more privileged than the other.
Which is a similar theme that we're seeing in Witches Steeped in Gold, with Irea being a prisoner and Jasmine being of royalty. Those are some common themes between the two. Now, what makes Witches Steeped in Gold a little different is there is a magic system in the story that is passed down from your ancestors. So you receive that as a gift. It's a privilege on both sides to receive that magic. And there are some that don't get that magic for one reason or the other. The other really cool and unique thing about Witches Steeped in Gold, and probably one of the more important things that makes it unique, is that it's based off of Jamaican folklore. Throughout the book, the vocabulary that's used and the cultural that's represented is heavily influenced by that Jamaican culture, which is something that I don't think we get to see a lot in young adult books. So it was very interesting to kind of get that insight into the culture.
Yeah, I love having new representation in fantasy novels specifically because they always pull from an entirely different pool than what we have in the mainstream, which is always kind of the medieval time knights and magic in that era. So having a new perspective is really awesome.
Yeah, it was very interesting to read and to get to experience as someone who had never been introduced to that type of thing before. Now, Vic, you were saying with Winter's Orbit, it was sci-fi romance, but you were saying it was more sci-fi than romance.
It's more romance than sci-fi.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it really is a romance book with sci-fi in the background. So I think it's a good go-between them, where if someone wants to get into romance from sci-fi, it has a lot of those elements, but you have enough sci-fi in the background to kind of attach to what you've already read before. But it also is a good intro to sci-fi for romance readers, I think, because it's a romance at its heart, but it has a lot of really interesting elements that really push it into a sci-fi, and it takes place in like a galaxy-wide empire, and there's a lot of space travel, so you have those sci-fi elements. But I think the other thing that really makes this a unique story is that it started out as an original fiction on Archive of Our Own, which is a fan fiction website. So even though it's not fan fiction, it has a lot of the same tropes and the same writing styles as a fan fiction story would. So it's an interesting bridge between those things too, that if you want to know what fan fiction's kind of about, or if you want to start reading mainstream stuff from fan fiction, it has those elements, but it is an original work with original characters and original storyline. So I think that was super interesting to find out after having chosen it for this episode, that it started out online on a fan fiction website.
And we've talked about fan fiction before in some of our previous episodes, so it's really cool to kind of get to see those things that we talked about connect with a published book that both of us got to talk about. The second book that I read was What Big Teeth by Rose Sazabo. It is a horror novel that has fantasy elements to it. Our main character, Eleanor, is coming back home to a family that she doesn't remember, and she's trying to find out how she fits into that new dynamic.
And the second book that I read is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Volley. It is about a half-native, half-white girl who has just graduated high school, is going into college, and how she's straddling the two cultures around her, so that of the local Native American tribe, which she is at least part of familially, even though she's not an enrolled member of the tribe, and then the white culture that she was also brought up in on her mother's side. And it's about her kind of finding herself in those cultures, but it also has a mystery aspect because she has to solve the crimes that are happening in her local community, and she has to work together with both of her cultures, really, to figure out how to solve that and how to make sure that the solution doesn't hurt the local community.
Right, so you can see some similarities between the two. There's a lot of suspense in What Big Teeth, where there's you're wondering who's good and who's evil and who to trust and how is the main character going to get through this. It also kind of blends aspects from Red Riding Hood, which is the French folklore influence, and then some Russian influence, kind of like a Baba Yaga type of storytelling. So it's very interesting to get to see, first of all, those two cultures being brought together, but also the main character struggling with which side to embrace, and then kind of coming to this understanding that perhaps she needs to embrace both sides of her culture.
Yeah, and that is kind of similar to how Donis, who is the main character in my book, has to kind of come to terms with the fact that she is part Native American, which this book does a great job of introducing you to the culture and the language. So I found out through it that the culture and the peoples described in this book are called Anishinaabe, which is the original people. And so instead of Native American, that's the term that they use throughout most of the book. And so she has to find herself in that culture in a very similar way, I think, and embrace that in a new way, compared to how she's kind of been on the sidelines of it and not able to be quite part of it for most of her life. So I think the two books are actually very similar in how the characters are interacting with people around them.
So what makes the two unique, at least for What Big Teeth, what makes it so unique is that it inverts the fairy tale that we might think we know. It has basis in the Red Riding Hood fairy tale, but it's so vastly different that it feels like a whole new story to that genre. And the characters in it are so unique, and you would never think of certain characters in this book kind of interacting because they're different levels of folklore and from different cultures that are being pulled from. So it's very interesting to see how those characters are written and how they interact with each other. And the storyline is very unique in that the way that the suspense is presented and the way the main character has to figure it out, the reader definitely feels like they are on a ride with the main character the whole time.
And I really love new interpretations of folklore and of fairy tales because they always bring something interesting into the mix that wasn't there before while remixing the things that we've already all seen.
Well, and it was so unexpected that it made the book gripping to read, because if I already knew that the story was going to be a Red Riding Hood story, I might have read it still, but I would have tried to predict. But the whole time I was wondering what was going on. I was right there with the character and thinking, oh, this person I can trust. Oh, wait, no, now I can only trust this person, and going back and forth with the main character.
That's super interesting. But I think that what was unique about The Firekeeper's Daughter was also, it was the cultural significance of the book. It was very much an honor to be able to read this book and get a view into the actual culture of the area, because the author is from Sault Ste. Marie, which is where the book takes place, and she was able to include a lot of things from her own experiences in that culture. And so we get the language, we get the culture, we get the background and what it's like to actually live in this area. And having that really added something entirely different to the book, because this is a mystery suspense novel, in very much the same way as What Big Teeth. But what made me keep reading, even though the mystery was good, wasn't necessarily what was going on with that, but just learning about this character and how she interacted with the world around her, which is entirely different from any experience that I've had. So it was absolutely fantastic to be able to see that happening.
Well, and from what I understand when you were reading it, just getting to learn the natural vocabulary that the Native Americans use in the book, and then how the author explained and introduced those terms to you was such a unique experience to the book. And it's, I think, a perspective that we rarely get to see in mystery, suspense, young adult novels. So I know that, like you said, it was such a privilege to be able to read something like that, and again, to be introduced to a culture that you and I may not be as familiar with.
Yeah, and we have a lot of mystery and Western novels specifically that include Native Americans in them, but so very few of them are actually written by someone who is a part of that culture, and not about someone who's coming in and seeing it from the outside. So being able to get that perspective on the other side of someone who's actually a native person to this land and who has been here for so long and has this huge cultural tradition and significance behind them was amazing, because you just don't get that in a lot of books, because there aren't as many, unfortunately, published by Native peoples writing their own stories.
Right. So Vic, we've talked about fantasy, we've talked about sci-fi, we've talked about mystery and horror. There must be one more thing on our list that we covered.
I mean, romance, slice of life, I think is a good one.
That is a good one. Did you happen to read a book that fits that category?
Our final debut book that I read was Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. And that book is about a girl who gets her PhD and goes off to Las Vegas to celebrate and ends up getting married to a woman in Las Vegas, and then the fallout of her life that happens after that, after she's graduated from her final degree and also married this girl in Las Vegas who lives across the country from her.
Right, that was the interesting thing when you were telling me about the story, is that they, after the marriage, they don't interact with each other on a physical basis as much.
Yeah, after the marriage, they both go back to the opposite sides of the country, and we kind of see Grace, the main character, kind of go back into her life as it was before she went to Las Vegas, and we start to see the struggles that she's having and what's going on with her college, which she just graduated, and she's supposed to be entering the job market, and that's a struggle for her because she does have a lot of boundaries in her way. She got an astronomy degree, a PhD, and she's trying to enter that field. But it's difficult because she has a lot of barriers that a lot of other people don't. And so you get to see that struggle, but you also get to see her while she's working with that and with her parents, getting to know this girl that she met and married in a day, and them actually forming a relationship from halfway across the country.
Well, and it's this perspective, I think we talked about it being qualified more as a new adult than it is a young adult. And the perspective of coming out of a master's degree is one that we don't get to see. Normally it's in a college setting, or it's transitioning from that high school into college. So seeing that transition from a master's degree into life for a new adult, it's such a scary experience to have. And it is a moment of, well, I've gone through all of this schooling. I've done all of the academia that I want to do right now. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, Grace has gotten to the end of the process. She has gone through as much schooling as is possible. She's a doctor now.
Oh, okay.
And to reach that point and to have been struggling for all of the years up to high school and then all of the many years that come after, it is, you've been in school for so very long. How do you deal with going to the next step? Well, you've reached your goal.
And also building that relationship that you've now stumbled into, like you were saying, and getting to know the friend group of the significant other and the family of the significant other, and then how that fits into your world plans. It's a very interesting perspective on this type of story.
But even with all that, as unique as it is to get a book from this perspective, from this point in someone's life, I think that the most unique part of this book was actually her relationship with her parents. Grace has divorced parents. One lives in Florida, goes traveling. One lives where she is. And she's now approaching them as an adult who is trying to go out on her own for the first time, where they've been supporting her for so long. And so seeing the effects of how their relationships have gone the last 27 years of her life, 26 years of her life, and how they have to change going forward, and how she has to kind of claim her own spot in her own life. That was fascinating, because it is also something that you don't really get to see in many books.
And speaking of slice of life, we've kind of talked about all of the debut authors that are coming up, and there's many more out there. These were just a few that Vic and I were fortunate enough to read. But there are other books by familiar authors that are coming out this year. One of them is actually one that I read, and it's One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. The other book that they have published is Red, White, and Royal Blue. So you might be familiar with her work. Now, One Last Stop is kind of a suspense, paranormal, sci-fi, slice of life book. There's a lot going on in this book, but I absolutely adore how the characters are written in this book. So basically you have your main character, August, who is trying to find her place as outside of her mom and her, who have had this relationship dynamic, and now she's moved away to New York. And she's trying to figure out who she is. She's in school still. She's trying to figure out what she wants to do. She has no idea. And she meets this girl on a subway named Jane. And it's kind of this dynamic between finding herself and working with Jane, and then solving the mystery of Jane that surrounds her. And then, understanding that there's more to life than what she had up to that point. And that it's okay to be loving towards others. And that it's okay to have friends. And you don't have to push them away. The characters in the story were so beautifully written that I felt like I was having conversation with people I knew in real life. The interaction between the characters was astounding. The mystery was so cool. I don't want to spoil it, so I won't. But the reveal of the mystery was, I had to step back. I had to put the book down. I had to take a couple breaths. It was really, really cool. And just, it's a dynamic that you don't get to see as much because, you're in a New York City and you're trying to figure out what this all means for yourself. It's such a good book. So it is definitely something that Casey McQuiston, it was
good. I mean, it was as good. Have you read her first book?
I had not read her first book yet.
Because that was also a very sweet novel. It sounds like it was very different from this one.
Oh yeah,
because it was much more political romance.
Okay.
Definitely not suspense and paranormal or anything. So definitely different. But it sounds like it's similarly good to the first one.
So that's just one of the familiar authors that are coming out, and I would highly recommend checking out One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Vic, what are some other books that are coming out this year that we are familiar with?
There are some amazing books coming out this year. I know some very popular authors that you're likely to recognize. Angie Thomas is putting out a new book called Concrete Rose that I believe is not a follow-up to her first novel. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir is coming out. We also have The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, who, of course, wrote Codename Verity, which we've done for this show. And then for some new authors, there are some debut things coming out. We have For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten, which I've also started reading as an advanced copy, and it's also a very good book. I just haven't finished it yet. And then there's She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, which is also a debut.
There's also Jade, Fire, and Gold by Jules C. Elton,
which I've been looking forward to.
Both of us have been anticipating that book for a while now, and I think we talked about it. Unfortunately, we couldn't get an arc in time, but it is definitely on our to-read list this year. I'm very excited for that one. There are also some updates to some series that are coming out. One of the main ones is the Sean and McGuire sequel, which is Across the Green Grass Fields, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, that's part of her Wayward Children series. So that one is definitely an anticipated one. She's a very popular author.
And then The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzie Lee is a continuation of her Gentleman's Guide
series,
to Vice and Virtue. Yep.
So it'll be the third book in that series.
Not including the little side novel?
Yes.
Okay.
The novella.
There we
go. That one's
go.
not included, yeah.
And then I know we have The Galaxy and Ground Within by Becky Chambers, which Vic had highlighted. It's exclamation point. I think they're really looking forward to that one.
Okay, that is a follow-up to The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is a fantastic sci-fi book if you like Firefly, the series, which we've talked about in a previous episode. You would very likely like this book series, and yes, I've been definitely looking forward to that.
I have in my notes exclamation point, exclamation point.
Yeah.
There's a local author too that has a book coming out. Vic, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, The Theft of Sunlight by Intisar Kanani. Her first book was Thorn, which came out quite a while ago. It was republished recently. I think we have it on our new shelf right now. And it is a book that's based on the Goose Girl novel, which was one of my favorites as a kid. But a new one is coming out that is kind of a follow-up series to that, and this is the first book in that series. And that's The Theft of Sunlight. So she is a local author, and I would definitely recommend checking out her books if you're into YA series.
So there are some of the books that are coming out this year. There are so many more that we couldn't name. There are so many good anticipated novels that are coming out this year. So I really hope we gave you like a basis to start your reading list, because I know you're starting them now. Just wanted to mention real quick, we mentioned in our last episode the short story contest. Tomorrow is the last day to enter into the contest, so make sure you finish those up and get them in. And then next month's episode is going to be more of a focus on African American authors and some books that we may not go to right away in our reading. So please look forward to that. Thank you guys so much for watching today. If you want to see more of our videos, there's a playlist on our YouTube channel, and you can visit us at clermontlibrary.org to see some of our other videos that we've put out.
And please comment down below if you want to show us any books that we missed that are coming out this year that you're looking forward to, or have any titles that you have or want to read on our list.
Yes, because we're creating our list too, and we would love to get some input from you guys. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us for this first episode of the new year. I hope it's going to be a good one. And I'm Katie.
And I'm Vic, and this has been Shelf Indulgence.